Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever time it is, Blue Marble Riders. Welcome to a gorgeous day on the east coast of Vancouver Island. Not as gorgeous as it has been, but still quite nice. I thought today's video would be on a response to Ireland's Gorilla Biker and England's Hippodromes, and a video they did a few weeks ago, and I'll put links below, asking if you could be born in any motorcycling era or witness any motorcycling era, which era would you choose to live through? Now I'm going to kind of pervert this a little bit by saying, and I believe these rules are allowed if you see the original videos, the original challenges, that you can travel through many eras, time travel. So before I get started, and for all you anoraks out there, I am not a historian and I may get a few things wrong, and if I do, definitely comment below. But let me just say a couple of caveats, a couple of things. One, for me, history is a matter of perspective. It's not a universal truth. History is recorded by rich, powerful, famous, influential people, and the rest of us just have to suck it up. So the interpretations and history we see is not always the universal truth, as I said. Second, I'm aware that this is nostalgia, and nostalgia is just history through rose-colored glasses, and I know that it wasn't really as rosy as we all think it was back then, and I'll illustrate that with a couple of words: drum brakes and skin-tight leather chaps with tassels on them. Okay, with that said, let's snick our Goldwing in reverse gear, and I'm using a Goldwing because they actually have a reverse gear, and go back in time to the 1920s, and there are two good reasons for that. First, we're going to hit 1921 and the pinnacle of board track racing. Board track racing was basically and essentially very tight race courses, highly banked, made out of wood, and you rode them on motorcycles with names like Excelsior, Indian, even Harley were there, Thor, some interesting names. And these were little more, when I say motorcycle, they were very much more cycle than motorbike. They had 1000cc engines. They could travel at over 100 miles an hour on the frame of a pedal bike. Can you imagine? Now these motorcycles, as we'll loosely call them, were quite a challenge to ride, not only because they had a total loss oil lubrication system. What did that mean? That meant when you're doing what I'm doing right now, not only do you have to do this, and you were racing, but you literally had to pump oil through your engine, hand pump the oil through your engine. Not only that, but the oil was exhausted onto the track. So here you are in the stands watching these crazy, noisy, wild motorcycles whipping around in their 90-mile-an-hour speeds. Nice looking bike. And they're dropping oil on the track. These tracks had to be rebuilt every 3 years because they just got worn out. They were at ridiculously banked angles. They were tight like velodromes. And these motorcyclists were having to dodge pools of oil and numerous splinters the size apparently of bayonets that could just shred you and your bike tires. Even though they had no air in the tires, they were quite capable of knocking chunks off and doing all sorts of different things to them. So I would have loved to have watched that, but not in the Valesburg race in 1921, where the slightly touched wacko-born Texan Eddie Hasher was racing his teammate, both of them on 1000cc Indians, where Eddie Hasher's bike inexplicably skidded out of control, turning up the embankment of the motordrome track, hitting the side railing, decapitating a spectator, smashing him into a post into 1,000 bits, and then sending the bike as if possessed back down on the track, only to spear a hapless last place Johnny Albright, killing him outright. No wonder these things were colloquially known as murderdromes. So that was the first era. I would love to have witnessed races like that, although not that one for obvious reasons, just to have seen it. Would I have wanted to participate? Not on your life. I think I'd have had multiple brown alerts in one lap. No thank you. Okay, let's take our 1920s cotton. Yes, cotton. Snick it into first gear and roll forward from 1921 to 1922, and the first inaugural Isle of Man TT run on the long course at the present starting line. I've never seen an Isle of Man TT, and I would love to see one. Love to see one. It's definitely on my bucket list. It's a crazy event that is still, luckily for us, going. But back in 1922, there was a future champion, 10-time Isle of Man TT winner, Stanley Woods from Ireland. I would have loved to have watched his inaugural Isle of Man TT, as it was a sequence of almost comical, unfortunate events. First of all, he starts the race. After lap 1, his spare spark plugs, that should tell you something about the state of the equipment that they were riding. His spare spark plugs fall out of his jacket pocket and he has to stop and pick them up. Next, as he's riding past the grandstand, he has to stop and help put a fire out. After that, he clips curbs, falls off his bike, and has to repair the exhaust belt, whatever that was, on his cotton TT racer. He comes in a respectable 5th place after all of that, and then, as I said, goes on to win 10 more races. What an incredible story that would have been to witness. So I'd like to have gone back then. Next, I would hand shift my Bruff Superior into its first gear gate, roll the throttle forward, and ease into the 1930s, and 3 dates in particular. The first one is the 13th of May, 1935, and some intrigue. Here you'd catch me just waiting by the hedgerow in a quiet country road in a place called Bovington on the Isle of Purbeck in Dorset in the UK, and I'd be listening for the sound of a Bruff Superior in the distance.
Watching for 2 young lads cycling down a leafy, curvy and hilly country lane. I'd be listening for T.E. Lawrence's Bruff Superior hammering towards us along the lane in the distance, possibly, supposedly, chased by a mysterious black car to clear up a mystery that has never been adequately proven or disproven. Motorcyclists want to know, was this a case of just another cager, just killing a biker? I didn't see him. Or was this an assassination? Did Lawrence die at his own hand, losing control of his Bruff 2 months after retiring from the military? Or was he really run down by a black car seen speeding by witnesses from the scene later? You see, Lawrence had changed his name to avoid the publicity generated from his accomplishments in Arabia. The recent retired military intelligence man had come back from Arabia expecting that peninsula to be united, but he was disillusioned and upset with Britain's political manipulations to inflame the rivalries between Arabian groups and to keep them divided. This, of course, served the British Empire. He walked out of Buckingham Palace on King George V, refusing a knighthood in the process, and he lobbied for Arab independence, even appearing in Arab robes while doing it. And combined with the fact that Winston Churchill was just about to appoint a pro-Arab motorcyclist that many British aristocrats and intelligence officers deemed as a traitor to the head of the British intelligence, did not sit well with the vast majority of the establishment and the intelligence community themselves. Motorcycles presented Lawrence with an escape from all this turmoil and publicity. George Bruff personally guaranteed that each of the 8 bikes that Lawrence owned in his lifetime would top 100 miles an hour. Lawrence wrote back to George, "Thank you for the road pleasure that I get out of them. Your present machines are as fast and as reliable as express trains, and the greatest fun in the world." So a motorcycle accident on a lonely stretch of country lane would be a conveniently believable alibi to put any conspiracy theories to rest. So, hiding in the hedgerow, I'd check out the facts. Did the 2 schoolboys see a black car speed away as they claimed before they entered the police station, only to deny it after several hours in the interview room with grey-suited individuals? Who were the shady characters at the scene covering the bent-framed and dented silver-tanked Bruff with a tarpaulin and having it transported quickly away? Why was a D notice slapped on the media by the Secret Service? Why, when George Bruff finally got hold of the machine, did it have black paint on the dented parts of the fuel tank? And why was he forbidden from testifying about this at the inquiry? The inquest into Lawrence's death was held the day after he died, and the funeral was held on the same day. So 2 hours after the inquest had ended, Lawrence had already been buried. I'd be sure to watch carefully, and you'd be the first to know if I found out anything about that black car.
When I was a kid, I grew up in England, and I used to ride every day on the train from Woking to Weybridge to go to school. And around the Byfleet area, if you had been looking beside the tracks, you would have seen a pudgy-faced kid pressed up against the grimy British Rail train window, straining his eyes to see the 100-foot wide, 30-degree high banked racetrack, Brooklands racetrack. And I would have been looking to reimagine the golden days of when that track was being used. Next, let's slip the Brough Superior's clutch just slightly and creep forward into July 1937, and you'd see me standing on top of that 30-degree embankment at the Brooklands racetrack, looking down that 100-foot wide track as Eric Foner Huff wrestled that bucket of bucking bolts towards me on the very bumpy circuit, trying to break the circuit record, the speed record for that track. And he'd do it. He'd do it by getting 123 miles an hour, something that you and me on a modern day sport bike like this might even have a brown alert doing on a smooth road. Eric would ride that 50-foot line right in the middle so that he would not have to lean that bike. It would just compress down on its suspension, no turning or slowing down necessary. Lap after lap after lap, wrestling that bike until he broke that record. It would be incredible. Next, we'd slip that clutch a little further, just to 1937, and there's Eric Foner Huff again, only this time on a supercharged, streamlined clad Brough Superior, and he's attempting to break a new land speed record, and he does it at nearly 180 miles an hour. See, you don't have to buy a Kawasaki H2R to get a supercharged motorcycle. They were doing it 80 years ago. Isn't that something? Wow. Unfortunately, this has always been a dangerous sport, and a couple of months later, poor old Eric perished trying to extend that land speed record. Ho-hum, let's move on. And now let's put on those gauntlets, cinch down that D-ring, and skim forward to 1961. And the reason I want to go to 1961 is I want to watch a legend in the making, a racer. His name was Mike Hailwood. Mike the Bike Hailwood. Now, Mike the Bike Hailwood, I would have wanted to see him before he was famous, as he rolled up to the 1961 Isle of Man TT, racing for a hitherto unknown team called Honda? Who? And that's pretty well what all the other motorcycle manufacturers said. Who is this? It's pretty much the way that we look at Chinese bikes today. You look at Chinese bikes, I look at Chinese bikes, and we think, oh, pile of crap. Well, this is the way that Japanese bikes, and in particular Honda, this new upstart team, were looked at, particularly by AJS and Velocet and Norton and many of the other manufacturers. And then this kid comes along, and in 1 week he wins 3, actually nearly 4 TT races. He does it on 3 different motorcycles. The first one is a 125cc Honda, the second one's a 250cc Honda, and the third one was the 500cc Honda. He wins the races and darn near wins a 4th on an AJS 650. Unfortunately for him, the AJS 650 broke down with a failed gudgeon pin. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what you call foreshadowing. Where are you now, AJS? We all know where Honda are. That would be something fantastic to have seen. And if you want some more intrigue, here we go. Mike had been in South Africa several years earlier, and he had been told by a psychic that he was in fact going to die on the road being hit by a truck in his car. He subsequently proposed to his future wife, who initially turned him down, saying, "No, Mike, I don't want to marry a motorcycle racer that's potentially going to die any weekend." And he said, "No, I'm not going to die on the weekend. I will be dying," according to this psychic, and I'm sure he was being humorous about it, "on a public road on my 40th birthday, hit by a truck." Well, oh lordy, you know where this is going, don't you? He had just picked up some fish and chips. His daughter and son were in the car with him, driving home. A large truck did a very illegal U-turn on a very dangerous stretch of road, crossing through some barriers to do it, and plowed into the side of him, his car, his Rover, killing instantly his daughter, killing him 2 days later in the hospital. His son survived. His wife told this story frequently afterwards, and it's a very, very sad ending. The truck driver got a £100 fine, and Mike Halewood got a death sentence. It just seems that nothing's actually changed, has it? If you're a motorcyclist, you just never seem to come off better when you meet a large vehicle. Oh, I know this hasn't been the most uplifting ramble through the motorcycling eras, so now I'm going to focus on something a little more uplifting. Grab your gauntlets and peel that rubber as we launch forward to 1975 and the Kawasaki Z1000 in super candy blue and yellow. Please, had I been old enough, that's the motorcycle I would have owned. I always had the passion to buy one and do it up, but that was put aside when Kawasaki released the Z900 RS, and the rest, as they say, is history. Isn't it, Stella?
Kickstart that two-stroke and rip forward to 1983 in a cloud of blue smoke, and I'll be sitting on my actual third bike, a blue and white Yamaha 350 LC. This bike was an absolute revelation to me. It was a huge step up, much faster, more agile and nimble than I thought a bike could be. It was about 150 kilograms soaking wet, and the monoshock made the handling phenomenal for the time. The twin discs stopped it reasonably quickly, and the insane power band above 6,000 RPM was an adrenal squeezer. With 6 gears, it would wheelie easily in second. It ate 754 strokes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to the legal limit anyway. I loved the looks, and while it was very thirsty, it had a gorgeous 17-litre fuel tank. Unfortunately, the big ends and the crankshaft were renowned for letting go, and in my case, they did. So, with my two-stroke fix ended early, if I had my druthers, I would have bought my neighbor's RG500 in the mid-1980s and played with that for pretty much the same reasons. But as an RG was renowned to be hard to ride, I think I probably would have only lasted a year before I would bounce off the rev limiter and move back onto a 4-stroke. I don't know if you've seen the ads for Davida helmets featuring one Catrion shot in Amsterdam, but I'm guessing millions of motorcycle riders fell in love immediately, if not with her, then with her mount. But I digress. My next bike would be a mechanically sound but cosmetically scuffed 850 Le Mans Mark II or an SP1000, whichever I could get cheaper. I would then tear into it, having fun fabricating and customizing it, creating something like Catrion's boyfriend's, Ben Parts, his Zagato Guzzi. This would be a great project, and I've always loved the shape of Guzzi cafes. Go and see Cafe Machine's website if you're not sure what I'm talking about. I'll leave a link above. Tell him BMR sent you. He won't know who the hell I am, but perhaps he'll give me a discount. I'd keep the battered and dinged ethos, but perhaps add some laced wheels and clip-ons, rear sets, bar end indicators and mirrors, twin clocks, perhaps a small fly screen, and yes folks, a brown leather cafe seat combo with a Ford taillight.
So how about you? If you've lasted all the way through this diatribe, let me know what motorcycling era you would have liked to have lived through. Or perhaps it's just like me, you're going to dance around. What sort of eras would you like to have been around for? And if that's not to your taste, well then just tell me what bikes you'd have loved to have had. Perhaps they're the bikes you had, or perhaps they're bikes you lusted after, could never afford, but you would have loved to have swung a leg over and wrung it out, given it a shot. what bikes would you have gone for? And don't forget, before you go, I've left the links down there for Gorilla Biker and Hippodromes, who are at least 2 video bloggers that I know have done this. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's really important for me. If you didn't like it, you know, put your thumbs down and let me know. No problem. Maybe I'll incorporate some of these suggestions in future videos. Cheers. Take it easy. BlueMarbleRider out.
Once again, thanks for watching, everyone. If this is the first time you've watched, please consider subscribing. I do product reviews, motorcycle reviews, off-road and on-road vlogs, as well as tours. Don't forget to follow me on social media, that's Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and to like, and especially, I'm begging you here folks, subscribe. This is the BlueMarbleRider, out.